And we are live with episode number 17 of Absolute AppSec. I'm Ken Johnson at CK Tricky on Twitter. And I'm joined by our co-host, Seth Law.
Hey guys, and thanks for joining whenever you happen to join, right? At Seth Law on Twitter here.
And by the way, I once again forgot to mute the video, so that's why there was that weird pause there, because I started hearing myself speak. Anyways, so a couple things to kick off tonight. A few things to mention. So next week we're going to take a break. I am going to be in Brazil with Chris Gates doing a talk at You Shot the Sheriff in Sao Paulo. I think that's how you say it. On Weird Al. It's an AWS attack framework we built. But the next week, so not next Tuesday, not this upcoming Tuesday, but the Tuesday after, we'll be back to have Chris on at Carnalonage on Twitter, and we're going to talk through just his story, the Weird Al framework. So it's going to be probably a longer one that night than just an hour. I don't know. We'll be making up for the previous week. Also, if you're looking for stickers, buttons, any kind of swag, send us your physical address or the PO box or whatever you want this stuff shipped to absoluteappsec@gmail.com. You can also send questions, topic suggestions, what have you, to absoluteappsec@gmail.com. Am I missing anything, Seth? Is that everything?
Yeah, I mean, just join the conversation, right? If anybody wants to jump on Slack, let us know. Send us an email to absoluteappsec@gmail.com, or jump on the Twitter chat. That's or not Twitter, yeah, Twitter DM or YouTube chat. We monitor all the channels as we're talking. So realistically, we want to know what everybody's interested in, and we're always looking for more people to come on the show, right? We've got Chris coming on in a couple of weeks. We've got a few other guests lined up, but if you are interested and have a specific project or topic that you want to talk about and you are interested in, reach out, or we may reach out to you depending on who we hear from and what we find interesting that's out there. So, but tonight, right? I mean, the last couple of days, everybody's been talking about Efail, so that's probably the first thing that we want to cover tonight, is where that has come from, what kind of the issues are that are around it. Right? There's been quite a bit of debate on how it was presented to the media, how the media has picked up on it, and also the remediation, the recommendations that are given out to people, and kind of the fatalistic attitude around PGP and GPG now. But Ken, do you have a good idea of what Efail is and what is happening there?
Yeah, I mean, so the general gist being, if you're able to sit somewhere where, meaning like if you're an attacker and you're on a mail server and you can inject some essentially, you have the ability to inject some HTML into an email before it's sent to the recipient, a PGP encrypted email. And things like, or clients like Thunderbird, I think was one of the ones mentioned, but there's a few big vendors listed. And those client apps, essentially, if they see HTML, they'll render it as HTML. So if you were to put in something like, I think they showed using an image source tag, and then you use that image source tag, embed that into the email. Effectively, what will happen is during the decryption of the email on the side of the recipient, if that recipient's using, like I said, Thunderbird or something like that, that image source tag and the code that goes along, the HTML code that goes along with it, will say, cool. We're going to send the contents of this email, now that it's decrypted, off to our server. That's kind of like the high level. They showed like using CBC and something
Yeah.
else.
Yep. I
Yeah.
mean, the initial is the HTML attack. I mean, it's basically HTML injection, right? Or
Right.
it almost has like an XSS, a cross-site scripting style injection attack built into it. That it's waiting for the decryption engine. You know, you're automatically decrypting things in Thunderbird or iOS Mail or Apple Mail, right? Using GPG Suite, and it auto decrypts, and then it sends a request off that happens to attach the message with it, right? So that, I mean, that injection attack is really taking advantage of the auto decryption function and then wrapping it in HTML injection, right?
Right.
So like, yeah, I mean, maybe there shouldn't be an auto decrypt function, right? Or you should have HTML turned off in your secure email client.
Yeah,
But
that's
that,
what they recommend too.
yeah, but that's not necessarily like that was the recommendation that was in there. But realistically, in the initial headlines around Efail were not, hey, guess what, HTML, like there's these components in your email client that may expose information. It was, oh no, PGP is broken, right?
Yeah, that's how it was, and it was like, stay tuned. You know, this is gonna be something bad's coming. You know, it was publicized as if it was gonna be like just PGP is broken. No coming back from it. Scrap it. That was literally like when I initially saw that. I don't remember who was tweeting this out, but that was on Twitter. That was what was circulating. Um, and of course, like, to those of us that have been in the security industry for a while, heck, if you've been in the security industry for 2 years, it doesn't fucking matter. Like, you've seen this before. It's nothing. You're like, all right, cool. PGP's broken. We'll see how this goes. So
Yeah, I mean, realistically, I was expecting some sort of padding oracle attack or something like that you could manipulate some signatures. It was moving through, right? It felt very climactic, whatever, to me. You know, being in the industry, because I was like, like we've seen all of these really like intense, encryption vulnerabilities that have gone on, and this one was, all right, realistically, PGP is still doing its thing as it was intended to do, but the way that we're handling the messages is probably not secure, or isn't secure, is really what's happening. Yeah, and in their mitigations, I posted the website in the chat, right? And their mitigations include no decryption, email client, disable HTML rendering, number two, those two, and then number three, patching. And the vendors of those clients, I'm sure, will fix patches as they move through, right? And then update OpenPGB and SMIME standards, right, to handle these edge cases of where there are open brackets and things like that. So I mean, realistically, I don't think it's as big a deal, but now we've got this trust issue that we've introduced into the client base, right, or into the community at large, that has to do with PGP and GPG.
right.
And that's where I feel like the damage really is not necessarily that, hey, we've got these tools that we use that have a flaw in how they were implemented, but we're now telling people, oh, guess what? What somebody that is in the a C-suite or something like that is going to take from this is PGP is not secure. We shouldn't be using it.
Yeah. No, yeah, well, maybe that's exactly what they'll take away from it. I hope not, because it's hard enough to get. I mean, there were I've seen attempts at getting PGP inside of what is it, a like an enterprise business corporate environment, to get that implemented, and doesn't work so well. And I feel like that's why people tend to gravitate to SMIME, which we didn't even mention that SMIME's part of this. Like, it doesn't matter. It's the client that ultimately is the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, PGP was the first one that they mentioned, but SMIME does the same thing, right? It's, you know, it's all the packaging and the auto decryption that's going on, and then HTML on top of that.
I don't know if you follow Matthew D. Green on Twitter. I do. But I did enjoy watching some of the, because I am by no means an encryption expert, right? That's not my thing. I'm not an expert in it. I know enough to do my job, and maybe a little bit more, but not an expert. And he's a legit expert. And it was kind of funny, not funny, but more insightful. Some of the things that I felt like I was seeing out of him, primarily because he brought up a bigger point, or I shouldn't say bigger point, but a point that might have been missed, which was this kind of uncovered the like difficulty in sending out patches or sending out patches, but also explaining to different vendors, you know, that there is an issue, right? Like, because, okay, so to make that, to give the concrete example that he talked about, and I'll try and find the thread and link to it, but effectively what he said was, it's tough. You kind of have to go with the biggest vendors first, because that's going to be the largest user base. And the reason you're not telling everybody is because inevitably somebody's going to get the details of it and leak it. And they may not leak it like, hey, you know, here's the exact, just like post it on Twitter or to whatever. They might say to some friends of theirs, and then their friends, and then, you know, and inevitably it gets leaked. So that becomes an issue because, right, like everyone needs to patch and put out updates before the information sort of known, if possible. That's the ideal situation for a vendor, is that they are able to update before anybody knows exactly how to exploit the flaw. Doesn't mean everybody will update, but they have an update available. And so the problem is that ends up being the route that most people seem to take, which is, let's let the big vendors know, and then the other vendors will find out as we can get to them. And typically they don't find out till too late, and they're upset. And yeah, it's hard to have a. It's interesting to hear someone say that it's hard to basically put out the information that you need without that being leaked to attackers first.
Yeah, I was just cruising through his history on Twitter, because I do follow him. But that is the interesting thing. He's talking about like TLS phones and the same thing that he's dealt with there, right? You deal with Apple, Google, Microsoft, you know, kind of the big players, everything's fine. Eventually you talk to some open source project and they do a blog post about it, right? About how they're fixing it or whatever, and it gets out without being able to get in front of it, right? Which is almost in violation of, you know, the, you know, responsible disclosure or whatever you want to call it, right? Yeah, that's an interesting problem to have, because of the, you know, the wide swath of clients that this one affects, right? It's easier when it's a single project, when it's a single, hey, this is a vuln in, you know, iOS or whatever, you only have to go to Apple. But when it is a standard like this that is causing the problem, there's not really one single entity that you have to go to. Yeah, I mean, I can see that as being a big problem, right?
Yeah.
Because who do you actually trust when it comes to that? So.
Who do you? And then he brings up the point that like there isn't a strong leadership within the PGP community.
Yeah.
Right. Well, so
Zimmerman, right? You know, but yeah, no, you're right.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that's what Matthew Green is saying. You know, I don't know. I wouldn't know, but that's what he's saying. So, which is an interesting. Again, I really did enjoy reading some of these, and let me see if I can find that thread and post it, because I thought it was, you know, for somebody who's educated on the subject, you know, that's where I'm going to get my information from.
Yep.
Wow. And there's a lot of these. It's like a 17-part tweet. That's why I'm having a hard let me go to like just one of these and see if I can get to the start of it. Oh, yeah. This is a okay. Okay, yeah. Found the start of it, it looks like, I think. Yes. Cool. All right. I'm gonna put this in there.
Okay.
Now somebody's got the beginning of the thread. Yeah, so it's like a 17. Well, hold on, I don't know. It's something like that. It's a pretty long thread, but it basically walks through, you know, kind of step by step what effectively what his thoughts are on it all. So
yeah.
Now, that all being said, of like it not being as impactful as maybe we thought it might be. Like the other thing is it in your okay? Because let me go the other way with this and say that like on Twitter, what I noticed were some big, you know, thought leaders or security industry, well known, whatever, like lots of Twitter followers, saying like, oh, you know, this is bullshit. Kind of, it was like this bullshit being smart asses, you know, like, oh, all two people that use PGP are, and, you know, going to be screwed. And while like, I guess there's some truth to the fact that, you know, maybe there aren't as many people using PGP as, I don't know, whatever. Like the reality is there are still people using PGP that legitimately have a need to be protected. Right. Especially because like we you know, we live in America, and there are certain concerns that we don't share with like someone who lives in Saudi or something like that, right? Or if you speak out against the government, you're in for a bad time.
Yeah.
You live in a place like that, you've got some serious concerns about the privacy of your emails.
Yeah.
And
you know, a couple of years ago, I was at, what was her name, Masa, that's a big Iranian activist, right? I think I told you about her. I met her at Overdrive.
Yeah, you did.
She was talking about the, you know, like her whole thing was teaching activists how to be safe online, right? Because if they weren't, they ended up in jail, right, realistically, or they may disappear. And it got to the point like she can't even go back to Iran now, where her family is, because of her, you know, involvement in teaching these activists how to encrypt their hard drives and encrypt their email and run through proxies, and, you know, all of the things that we kind of take for granted that we do at times. But, you know, realistically, we're not as concerned with that as somebody that's in, you know, that's under some sort of an oppressive regime, right? So it, like I can see her having a huge problem with the fact that PGP doesn't work as intended, or hey, guess what? I recommended that everyone use you know, the Thunderbird plugin for GPG, and now all of a sudden it turns out that it's insecure. Was this ever an issue? You know, maybe this is why people were getting arrested, or you know, it's just it's a different aspect, you know. And I always, like when I met her and we talked to her, I was like, yeah, what I do is interesting, but realistically, it's like there's not necessarily lives on the line, as opposed to, you know, somebody in that situation. So.
Yeah, totally. I mean, there is a different threat model, you know, or yeah, I guess you'd say threat model, or, you know, set of things you worry about that is, you know, that are different from other folks. So I don't want to minimize it completely and say that it's not an important find. It's more of, and I don't think it's necessarily like, it's definitely not mind blowing. It's definitely not, you know, ultra surprising, but it is important that it's fixed. And I think that it was at the very least, it's good that it's out there, and that, you know, there's some prevention and some stuff you as a user can do right away, you know, in terms of disabling your, but you know, here's the thing, like realistically outside of the community, is this making news? I genuinely am asking, because I don't know. Like if I went on, let me look, let's go to CNN.
Yeah.
See if anything on CNN Tech. That's where I'm gonna go. Because if you look at like Ars Technica, or if you look at certain sites, you'll like Hacker News, whatever, you'll see this stuff, but like there's things that we believe to be
Yeah, I don't see anything, right? Like if you search CNN, all CNN, and just type in Efail, it's not even there, right? I mean, I don't think PGP. I think you're right. I think we get all up in arms because we're used to using it, or we know people that do, or we're using it. We're using PGP for X, Y, and Z. But the general public just it's going to pass them right by. Right? If I mention this to friends and family that aren't into the industry, I'm sure they're just like the typical reaction. Their eyes glaze over and they're like, "Oh yeah, okay, something's vulnerable." Right? You're gonna get a lot more traction if you talk about the latest breach that they're talking about on CNN, or if their data was leaked. Right?
Yeah, I went to MSNBC, searched for PGP, searched for Efail, nothing. Let's go to Fox News. Just kidding. JK. No, but like nobody gives a shit. Like, I mean, okay, I should say that's the point, is that people that might need to have this information may not know about this information. So, again, it's like you said, we all get up in arms about it, and then the nerds get upset, and then the general public has no idea what's going on.
So. I mean, and I think that's true of most industries, right? But yeah, whether or not they actually use this sort of stuff, that's the question, right? I have a hard enough time getting people to use secure chat clients or to contact me securely.
I know. Oh man, yeah. Whenever seriously, on the note of totally unrelated to this, I mean, for those of us that actually have to PGP encrypt stuff occasionally and do that with other people, it's a pain in the ass. It always is. It's like, hey, can you send that to me? I'm going to send that to you encrypted. You're going to send that to me encrypted. And it's always a pain in the ass. It never goes well.
Yeah. It's always, oh, it doesn't look like I have your public key. So can you send that to me? I'm asking for it in plain text. Somebody intercepts that communication and, inserts their PGP key in there. You know what I mean? It's
yeah. And then they send it to you and it's expired.
I need to go sign this or check on keybase.io or pull from a secure location. You know what I mean? Or like find a key for you that is signed by someone that I trust, or I trusted at a key signing party. Yeah. I mean, you ask, your wife to do that, right?
Oh, dude, if they actually had a POC running on, we'll say, a bunch of email servers, and they were actually receiving people's emails, I swear to God, 75% of them, maybe 80% would just say fucking test or testing if PGP works or whatever. Like, if that would be what it looks like. Anyways, yeah, I'm sorry. I know we were short. We've only got 20 more minutes here tonight. We're going short. So, other things to talk about.
Yeah,
we're going to talk about CSRF. I know, but the Facebook couple articles. The Facebook one, Facebook bug bounty CSRF, and then the one you brought up. Actually, could you explain the cracking Java RNG for CSRF one to me, since I didn't get time to read much of it?
Yeah,
that's my fault. Yeah, sorry.
Let's go over it quick. I needed, I don't know if you got it, but my wife wants me to cut earlier than that. So, yeah.
Okay.
Let's talk cracking that, and then we'll call it for tonight, and then we can get back on later if we need to. Okay.
Cool.
So I'll post this blog, or I'll post this link really quick. Realistically, what happened is somebody did evaluation on Java server faces CSRF token and how it's being generated, right? And JSF is open source software that's Java server faces and it runs something similar to ASP.NET. It uses a view state variable for passing information from the client to the server. But it was never intended to be a secure source of randomness, right? Was never really intended to sign the requests, right? And when we talk about CSRF, I'm talking about cross-site request forgery. This is a specific attack that allows people to hijack sessions or ride on top of already validated sessions to submit forms. You can go read up on it on OWASP. Those of you that are in the industry understand what CSRF is. And actually, this article has a kind of a quick recap on it, how it actually works. But the issue that I wanted to talk about was the fact that the random number generator that is being used in this open source software and Java server faces was not the secure random. It was just a, it's just java.util.random that we know does not generate secure random numbers, right? And they went through the whole process of figuring out how to predict what the next random number would be and generate their own view state variables that would be accepted to bypass the cross-site request forgery protections that were built into Java server faces. So realistically, that's what's happening. If you read through the blog post, he goes into the Java code that's actually being used to generate the tokens by Java server faces. And this is software that's used by lots of kind of enterprise level applications and web applications, right? But you can even extract things like the seed. Because you have access to the source code, you can extract the seed that's being used for the token. You can figure out what the next calls are going to be. You can actually, figure out what the next random numbers are going to be because it isn't secure, and generate that, that view state variable so that you can actually execute or submit actions on behalf of someone else or someone that's already logged into the application. So like the reason that I bring this up, I just saw it on Twitter and I thought it was, it was pretty interesting research to dig that deep. But we use a lot of software in our applications nowadays that depend on open source software like Java server faces, like Ruby on Rails, but we don't necessarily understand how things are being implemented, right? We're not running that through, static analysis tools. You may be in your organization, but most people aren't. You're not taking that middleware apart to see how it's actually generating those tokens. What we're doing is we're blindly trusting that other people are implementing something properly, right? I mean, we talked about the node vulnerability that happened just recently as well. And all of this has to do with trusting code that we probably shouldn't be trusting, right? So, I mean, that's the short rundown that's on it. Ken, you were talking about CSRF in another aspect. Do you want to, jump into that quick?
Well, there was the Facebook bug bounty CSRF post, and basically what it was they called it client side CSRF, and the reason is that JavaScript on the client side was parsing the location piece of the URL. For those that aren't aware, if you put let's say you have a URL example.com/example pound or hash symbol, whatever, that hash and that whatever part, that's effectively not going to the server. That's client side accessible via JavaScript, but when you hit that endpoint, the server's only seeing example.com/example. It's not seeing that other part. So, so where it gets interesting is the client-side JavaScript code was vulnerable in the sense that it was sort of like it was parsing that location piece to then formulate a request that has a CSRF token. And what was happening was essentially, if I'm not mistaken, and I have to look back through, but it's effectively like a DOM-based cross-site scripting attack where You're changing that that location value to point somewhere else, and then because that CSRF token is automatically being applied to that request, because it is a function that basically builds a request with a CSRF token, then it's sending off the request to whatever endpoint. And in this case, it was GraphQL endpoints. So effectively, they were able to get GraphQL requests off to GraphQL endpoints. Well, sorry, when I say get them, meaning like in a proof of concept, not like attacking users. This was for a bug bounty. So they were able to show that they were able to modify the location such that it could be sent to somewhere not expected, another GraphQL endpoint with a valid CSRF token, and then cool, you're good to go. Like you've CSRF'd that person. And what I was going to mention is just that, because we were talking about this at work, but what it brought up was another interesting point was, so this is the assumption being like the CSRF token that we're talking about is just tied to, say, the user session, and it's good as long as the user session is good. And it's one token.
And that's a pretty common way of doing CSRF as well, right? That's not a wide stretch, right? That's a common question that I get when I'm talking or I'm training developers is, hey, you know, this CSRF token, is it okay if I do it per session or do I need to do it per form, right?
Right. And this is a good time to bring up a couple places that like a per form CSRF token can protect you. So this would be a good example, right? Because a per form CSRF token means that if the CSRF token that's being sent in the request was meant for, like, let's say, I don't know, a create GraphQL endpoint, right? And you're calling, I don't know, an update GraphQL endpoint with that same CSRF token. Well, it's not going to work. That CSRF token is only good for that one particular endpoint. So that's just in this example a place where that would have helped. But then there's other areas inside of an application where this helps too. Like, so for instance, let's say you've got an endpoint that it's lacking a proper authorization check. So an administrator can hit this endpoint. An administrator can send a post request to this endpoint, right? And a user can't, or shouldn't be. A user shouldn't be able to, but they actually can because there is no authorization on that endpoint. Now, unless there's a view generating a CSRF token, which there shouldn't be for a user. So meaning a user goes to a page and gets a form where they can hit submit and send a post request off to an endpoint, then a CSRF token would be generated, sure. But most often what you'll find is like that view is not necessarily there, but like the endpoint itself is maybe vulnerable. Maybe we forgot to put a filter on there or something like that. Like we being like just developers in general. So it's helpful because what would actually happen is, let's say, I guess what I'm saying is, let's say I'm a user, I know how to craft a request to a endpoint, or I'm guessing, and I send a post request off, and it should work because there is no filter on there. Well, because I don't have a CSRF token, the request is going to fail. So even though I don't have an authorization check, because I don't have that perform CSRF token on that endpoint, it's going to fail. Now, if I had a CSRF token that was good just for like, in general, just it's just valid. Like it just says, okay, yeah, this is this person. The CSRF token is tied to this person, then like that doesn't help you at all. But if it is just for that specific, that perform URL, then yeah, it's gonna crap out. It's gonna say, we didn't generate a token for this endpoint. This isn't the token we generated.
Yep.
So, and then, you know, the rest authorization may not be there, but you're good. So
yeah.
Couple.
And I mean, that's the recommendation that I take out of that is that the Facebook, you know, the CSRF in general probably should be. I mean, there's some overhead to that, but any form that's super sensitive should have its own token value. And if it doesn't, then there may be ways that you can get around that, right? Like there's other technology that's in the chain that you may be able to take advantage of. Yeah, I mean, maybe we should do a further, you know, deep into this.
Yeah, I could probably go
we
off on
can
a
at a
couple.
different time. I've got to yeah, I'm sorry about this, guys, tonight, but I do have to run. So, yeah, let's table that CSRF discussion though. Is there any, I mean, we've talked about Efail, we've talked about CSRF a little bit, and some of the dependency stuff. I know it's not feeling like we've finished the discussion, Ken. But is there anything else that is on the top of your mind before I have to run out the door here?
No, just again that we're gonna be taking a break next week, so we'll be back for a pretty long episode the following week with Chris Cates.
Yeah, and I'll make sure and set aside time on that one too. So we'll have it cleared up and make sure that we get into things with Chris, as we should, right? Because he's got a pretty interesting backstory, and we'll want to talk with him about everything, right?
Yeah, definitely. He's got some good things. He's got some wisdom. So, all right. Well, take it easy.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks for joining us tonight. If you're on, I will post things on, post the discussion on absoluteappsec.com. And as always, email us at absoluteappsec@gmail.com. Okay.
All right. Thanks everyone. All right. Bye.
Thanks, Ken.